before our communion service this morning. We want to find out if there's any, or ask for any questions following the sermon this morning. Yes.
So early on you said only God can do the, show justice and mercy kind of in the same act. But isn't that also, I mean, on a much lower level, true of parenting?
Yeah,
It's merciful to our children.
Absolutely. What I meant to say was only by his standard, I should say. Not that he's the only one. No, he shows us how to do the exact same thing.
Right.
But it's only by his standard.
Not just in parenting.
Yeah, in anything, sure. He gives us a standard to show us how it can be done. John.
It's just a translation thing. I read out of the New American Standard, and in the verse 6 there, where it says, for they poured out the blood of the saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. They deserve it. It's what the New American Standard says. They've received their just due. But it's just blunt in the NAS. They deserve it.
Yeah, 3 words. Yeah, the New King James, the King James, is a little bit more perhaps nuanced, but it's obviously still the same thing. Justice is happening here, and I really believe that when we are called judgmental, ultimately what's happening is we're being told that our idea of justice is wrong and their idea of justice is correct. They can call us bigots and all kinds of names, but when we call for God's justice, then we're the bad people. There's always a judgment somewhere. Oh, somebody's always judging. We make a mistake and we say, okay, no, we're not judgmental. Actually, we got a Bible, and it does tell us how to live, actually. And to abandon it is ridiculous, foolish. Yes, Dave.
So, because we're not promoting this God of justice and mercy and judgmental God, we see our nation in decline. The question that begs to be answered is, what do we need to do different? What? I mean, we can sit here and just keep beating our heads against the wall. What do we need to do? I guess ultimately it's His mercy that will turn things around.
Yeah.
And it's His judgment that will come down upon the wickedness. But we see things going on with our new House of Representatives where they're looking at, they want to implement a very socialist, exactly what you just read from from the Soviet Union. So, either if you don't see that, you're not obviously not looking at the news and see our society. So,
saw a good article by what I think is a really respectable guy, George Grant, talking about preaching and how preaching is so falling out of favor nowadays. Now, for whatever reason, by the grace of God and the hard work of folks here, the preaching from this little congregation here has reached around 12,000 downloads, if you will. And every once in a while I hear from someone. At a minimum, it must be preached. As I trust and hope by the grace of God I'm faithful to His word and preach the God that is revealed in the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, what about results? How's it working? And there I have sort of news I have good news and bad news. That God ultimately brought His people back. The 10 northern tribes did not listen to the prophets, and they were just gone. Some people believe they had a testimony, other people believe they didn't. The southern kingdom, Judah, who were later called Jews, of course, their bad news was they didn't listen to it, but the good news is they ultimately did to some extent. If we judge our cause by results, we're probably going to be in trouble. because by that standard, your basic Old Testament prophet was a complete failure, especially Jeremiah, who even at the end of his life, he'd been right again and again and again. I know we've talked about this before, but even at the end, when he's carried off to Babylon, they realize who he is. They say, no, you don't have to come. You can go back home. I don't know which was worse for Jeremiah, to go back home to Jerusalem or to go to Babylon. I don't even know. But he goes back home to Jerusalem. And you might recall, then the people that are left there, the losers, the people without any teeth and without a job, who are living in grass huts, probably, come to him and they say, give us the word of the Lord. And he says, well, if I give you the word of the Lord, you're not going to do it anyway. They say, oh, yes, we will. He says, okay, I'll give it to you. And then, of course, they said, shut up. We don't want to hear from you anymore. It was just like that. This was at the end of his life after he'd been right again and again and again. The task that we have in front of us is, I think, the task of the prophets, to say and do what's right. If we're going to judge by results, the results of the prophets was not so good. But who knows, maybe we're setting up a sign for people later on down the road. I don't know. There have been times in history, there have been times in the scriptures when God did turn his people around. Mercifully, he did that. In the meantime, we can't stop. And a book I just recommend to all of you by Ian Murray called Revival and Revivalism. How many of you are familiar with that book? Some of you are, yeah. Terrific book. And what Ian Murray does there, he talks about the Puritans and their preaching, and revival came just in the midst of their preaching. And they were surprised by it. You remember that. That was a big part of that book, that if you got a chance to read it, they just were preaching along, and then God in his mercy sent revival to the people to whom they were preaching. They really weren't changing. Murray wrote that book in contrast to Charles Finney and others that later on came up with methods of revival. You have the mourner's bench, and have the invitation, and have somebody crying and so forth. And that was a contrast to that. But they kept preaching. That was their job. Yes?
Goes without saying in this crowd, but another thing we can do is just, especially as fathers, just make discipling our families a priority in these things. So I just know from my life it's easy to get busy and not take the time to do that. It's just a good reminder to myself. That's something else we can do.
Yeah, I always think in these kind of times, speak about God's law. When you sit down, when you rise up, when you walk by the way, and so forth. And the influence we were just talking about this. The influence that you as a father have is tremendous. Influence I as a grandfather have now, really a lot of influence. I mean, my grandkids, right? They kind of believe me, right? Who else believes me like my grandchildren do? Nobody, right? Grandpa said it, must be true, right? What's that? Yeah, they'll figure it out eventually. They have to wonder about Grandpa too, like everybody else. But in the meantime, I do have that influence, and this is a point that we always have to remember. If we can't do it at home, where are we going to get it done at all? There are examples in Scripture of faithful fathers. I always think of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What is the thing that really distinguishes them? They conquered the world. Actually, what distinguishes them is that they were faithful, especially Abraham. Isaac, pretty much. Got some help from Rebecca there, as far as I'm concerned. And Jacob. Faithful family guys, really. I would like to think that there's some kind of way we could turn this mess around. But as long as we, in our Christian circles, as long as we're scared and do not want to present a God like Revelation 16 presents, we're cooked, I'm afraid. We are cooked. And I thought that might be somewhat controversial, what I said this morning, that we do not, in our Christian circles, we do not present that God. I thought that might be a little controversial even in this congregation, but apparently not, which is good. I mean, do we agree that God there is not what we present? We have to present a God that's acceptable to those who hate him. Right? It's bizarre. It's craziness. It's nuts. Do we normally do the hymn? No, we go right to communion. Okay. I'll ask John to come up and serve communion this morning.